actually really honored to introduce the next speaker, who is U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn is the senior senator for Tennessee and the first woman to represent the volunteer state in the United States Senate, which is extremely exciting for me. She serves on the Deputy Whip team and is a member of the Finance Committee, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. She serves as the ranking member on the Commerce Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, Product Safety, and Data Security, and on the Judiciary Subcommittee on Human Rights and the Law. Before her election to the Senate, she represented Tennessee's 7th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. She's dedicated her public service to promoting opportunities for all Tennesseans, including by breaking barriers for women, which I think is incredibly important, especially in our government, and making America a more prosperous place to live. She's going to join in a conversation with Benson, who's an associate professor of political science and Asian studies at Vanderbilt. So he is a researcher who focuses on international politics and security, political economy of conflict, and Chinese politics and East Asian relations. And so you guys can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And Senator Blackburn, welcome to Vanderbilt. It's wonderful to have you on campus, and it's my honor to have this opportunity to talk to you about some of the pressing threats to national security that our nation faces. We all know that one of your areas of expertise and focus is application of emerging technologies to national security. One of the things that maybe not everybody knows is that this week you introduced new legislation focusing on the development and application of quantum computing to national security. So I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to talk to you about that a little bit. But first, big picture. How do you assess the current global landscape? What do you, in your view, what are the top security threats facing the United States today?
Yes, and one of the things, let me say first, I am thrilled that Vanderbilt is doing this, and I am just so pleased that your attention is in this area. And General Nakasone, it's always so good to see you, and I find it really quite interesting. Previously, in his previous job, we would have him answering all the questions. And now here I am answering, so you've got me. Turnabout's fair play.
Should we invite him back up to the stage now?
Yes, exactly. But I always appreciated how fearlessly he took the lead in defense of our men and women in uniform, and how he worked to make certain that we were modernizing the U.S. military. So thank you for that dedication, and thank you for being here at Vanderbilt. When we look at the global security landscape, I think the first thing we have to look at is what I term the new axis of evil: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and the participation that they have one with another. And we know that Iran, China, and Russia have just completed their 5th round of naval exercises, joint naval exercises, since 2019. So this is something that we should be paying attention to and realize that they are trying to achieve global dominance. Of course, this is China's goal, and we know this is their goal, and we know that they are working tirelessly on it, and they're using different ways to come at us. And whether it's intellectual property theft, economic coercion, the military exercises that they are doing with people, Iran, North Korea, the way they are looking at that. So when you look at the Indo-Pacific, you have to look at what is happening there with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and what that means globally. With Russia, their push the friendship they have with Iran, how they are using North Korea when it comes to hypersonics. Iran is doing drones, and China is buying Russia's oil, and Iran's oil. So we have to take that into consideration.
So you mentioned the Indo-Pacific. I'm going to want to ask you some questions about that in just a few minutes. But on the point of emerging technologies, given the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, machine learning, how are these technologies, in your mind, both an opportunity and potentially a threat for national defense?
Well, one of the things with the emerging technologies is realizing that China wants to win the AI race, and AI is going to be able to be our biggest development and use from a positive, or if China wins it, they're going to be able to break a lot of encryption that we have and that we rely on. And I was thrilled that you all were able to hear from Sam Altman yesterday morning. I texted with him. He thought you all were a wonderful audience, and he was pleased to be included, even though it was virtually. And the way the work is being done there with AI, helping us break some of the barriers, when you look at what's happening with financial services and medical research, auto manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and then, of course, the threat to content, which we do have here. We have to look at these technologies, whether they're quantum, and quantum is the rails that a lot of your AI is going to run on, and realize that China would like to dominate this market by the time we get to 2030. So of course, we've got to pay attention to that. That means legislators have got to focus. It means that our private sector needs to be pushing forward with innovation so that we do not fall behind. We know the CCP is going to continue to fund and push. We need our allies working with us on these issues, and I do think that that is an important part of this component.
So you mentioned the role of lawmakers. Let's talk about some of your specific work. You have advocated for a well-funded, a more modern military. In your view, what is the role of AI in this effort?
Well, when you look at preparing the warfighter for being able to synthesize information that is coming to them, and doing that in a timely manner, being able to figure out what is an altered image or an altered environment and what is real. AI is going to be useful to them in that process. They need that because we know the CCP tries to conduct cognitive warfare. So this will give our warfighters another tool. Now, there is a great program that Senator Rosen and I were able to jumpstart through the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's called the Pathfinder Program. And Vanderbilt has done fantastic work in this arena because it puts the warfighter right in touch with the researchers that are here at the university. And it allows the warfighter to say, here is a problem set, and it allows the researchers to say, let's solve this, and here is a toolbox that we can use to solve it. We need more of that. And that is a way we're going to be able to strengthen what is happening at the forward operating base or out in the field. And then our warfighters will have those tools they need just in time and be able to make real-time decisions that maybe right now they have not been able to make. So these applications are going to find their way into the warfighter. Many of these are going to be commercially developed applications that will be able to be
So
adapted.
you see a natural partnership between the public sector and the private sector?
I do. And I think as we continue to move forward, it is a partnership you can see between the private sector, between academia, and also between the U.S. military.
So let's talk about the new legislation that you introduced this week. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, we are working, you're wanting the quantum information.
quantum
We've had a busy
information,
week.
Oh, okay.
So we've
the one I'm
done some
referring to, that's
AI, we've done some quantum. Yes, at the Commerce Committee is where we're going to deal with the quantum issues. And our nation has had a national quantum initiative. And this has allowed us to target resources into developing and deploying quantum technologies, moving things through this R&D phase and moving them into commercialization. Well, our quantum initiative expired last Congress. So I have been tasked with getting this back on track. And it is completely bipartisan. And I do think it's very exciting. Now, Senator Lujan and I have developed a bill which is quantum test beds. And this would allow test beds for near-term technologies, something that we would like to see more of. And when you look at what is happening in our state and looking specifically at the city of Chattanooga, Chattanooga is developing and deploying the first commercially available quantum network. And they're hoping, and their goal is to be able to house innovators who will come and will be working there. 2 years ago, we did a quantum roundtable in Chattanooga, and we had people from all around the country that came in to participate in that quantum roundtable. So having these test beds for near-term technologies is something that we think will help boost that. And that is something that we as a government should want. We want those innovations to be here. We also have a quantum institute, manufacturing USA. Senator Peters and I are establishing a quantum institute within the Manufacturing Institute. This will focus specifically on utilizations that can be achieved for different applications here in the US that affect advanced manufacturing. And of course, our state is recruiting so many advanced manufacturing businesses. So we want to escalate the completion of some of these applications and technologies so they can be deployed in order to help existing businesses or to recruit new businesses into our state. We also have the Quantum Defense Initiative, and this will put additional resources into DoD so that they have the ability to look at ways they've traditionally done things. And as we talk about 21st century warfare, say, okay, how could we use quantum? Maybe it's something with Space Force. So that component is filed. And then Senator Warner and I have the standard setting bill, which affects all of our emerging technologies. And this would incentivize keeping the US in that leadership role in setting the standards for our emerging and new technologies so that we do not lose that priority position. We know that we need to be the leader when it comes to quantum, when it comes to emerging technologies, when it comes to AI. And keeping that standard setting capability is going to be an imperative for us.
So I just want to remind folks that if you want to send in questions, please send them to the email that's above our heads here, and we'll try to feather those into the conversation. I have a question that came up yesterday on one of the panels. Somebody made a comment which I thought was thought-provoking. Somebody mentioned that the complexity of these emerging technologies poses a challenge to lawmaking, to selling a voting public on the urgency of some of these, of the importance of some of these technologies. But in addition to that, it also creates some risks and a lack of understanding of what those risks are. So as a lawmaker, how do lawmakers and the policymaking process balance this risk, given the complexity, balance the risks that we don't want to fall behind adversaries, but on the other hand, we don't want to charge headlong into new frontiers that are poorly understood?
And figuring out how to temper that is something that is important. And as we have looked at technology, whether it is in my role as chairman of Consumer Protection Data Security at Commerce, where we're dealing with quantum, or whether it is over at Judiciary as chair of Privacy and Technology, what you have to do is realize Congress moves at a snail's pace. And a new technology can go through a complete generation of its life in 18 months. And so you cannot legislate to the technology. You have to make certain that you're putting a framework in place, but not to the specific technology. Now, the music industry is a great test case on this when you look at how royalties are written into federal statute. But an overview, and I know Congressman Green talked yesterday, and he and I have worked on these issues a bit to make certain that what you're doing is putting a framework and protections in place. And that's why things like the test bed bill, that's a great example of something that helps get you to commercialization. Or the Quantum Institute in Manufacturing, there again, you're putting that framework together. But legislating to a technology is something that actually will slow you down, because the technology will be on to the next generation before the ink is dry on the bill.
This seems like a difficult challenge.
But it's a worthy challenge, because we know that our competitors and our adversaries are hard at work trying to be the global leader. You look at what the CCP is doing. Global dominance by 2047, 2049, that's a goal of theirs. You look at what they're doing with the Belt and Road Initiative, the Silk Road Initiative. You look at where they're going with debt diplomacy and how they're reaching into these other countries. That is why we have to take this up and then look at these issues. Our No Fakes bill that we unveiled this week, that Senator Coons and I have done, that protects our entertainers and protects individuals on their name, image, likeness, voice. So you put a group of protections around that and allow them recourse if their name, image, likeness, voice, their writings are infringed by individuals or platforms.
So do you think lawmakers have a responsibility and a role to inform the voting public about some of these complex issues and technologies? Is this the role of the media? How do we overcome that barrier?
I think that is a shared responsibility. We spend a lot of time communicating with Tennesseans. We do a weekly newsletter. You all can sign up, blackburn.senate.gov, but we send out a weekly newsletter. We've got nearly 1 million Tennesseans that take this newsletter. We put things up on social media. We do telephone town halls. We respond to letters. We have citizens come in and meet with us on issues. We do things like the Quantum Roundtable that we did in Chattanooga, where we have individuals that are coming in because they do we do want them to know about this. And whether it's the local, state, or federal level, whether it's educational institutions or the private sector, it is exciting what is happening with technology right now. And I was meeting with somebody earlier today, and I said, you know, when you look at what we have, the resources we have in this state. Oak Ridge National Labs, where we house the world's fastest computer. And we're so proud of Oak Ridge. You look at the opportunity that exists for TVA to take the lead in small modular reactors for electric power generation. You look at the ability to test hypersonics, which Tullahoma, Tennessee, with Arnold Engineering, that is the only place in the United States that you can test hypersonics. And then just to the south of us at Marshall Space Center, there in Huntsville, you look at what is happening with Space Force. You look at the great work that NASA is doing. You look at the push they've got, not only for the moon, but Mars. And you realize right here where we are, there is so much opportunity to develop these technologies that I think it's great for our citizens to be aware of this. I think it is wonderful when we have schools that are doing STEM labs and students that are being exposed to these technologies and these opportunities. And to me, it is a very exciting time, not only for the work you all are doing here at Vanderbilt, but for our state and for our region.
I'd like to talk a little bit about China. So,
sure.
How is the competition between the United States and China on these emerging technologies? How is that, in your view, reshaping the way that we should be thinking about national security?
And we know that regardless of what we do, China has had as their goal to achieve this global dominance. We know that China is trying to buy friendship around the world. And more countries are realizing that with Belt and Road and Silk Road and debt diplomacy, China comes in and tries to take control. And when you look at the Pacific Island nations where they've been really aggressive, and you see how they went in to strengthen their position there in the South China Sea, and how then they've moved over into the Horn of Africa, into Djibouti, with what was a commercial port, but has turned into a deepwater Navy port. And you can fly over and see how expansive that is. You realize that they're trying to buy their way into these friendships. I do believe it behooves us to continue to work with our allies and our adversaries, and our allies and our friends, and make certain that we continue those programs like foreign military sales, and that we continue these training programs that we have shared with many of our allies, so that they stay with us on the development of the technologies. And as Senator Warner and I have worked on the standard setting, see, this is one of the reasons it's so important that we capture that ability to hold those standards here and to keep people working with us.
So you speak of allies and some of the concerns posed by China. What do you think the role of the United States should be in the Indo-Pacific, in the Taiwan Strait, in the South China Sea? How should the United States be functioning there?
My position is that we should be standing with Taiwan. Taiwan has declared their independence. They have a president, they have a cabinet, they have a military. They celebrate their Independence Day. And recognizing that with Taiwan, I've got a couple of pieces of legislation that are specific to Taiwan, which deal with a Taiwan Lend-Lease program that we could do defense-wise. Lend-Lease programs have been very successful with our military. And then Senator Brian Schatz and I have one that deals with travel and tourism that strengthens some of the vetting that goes into visitors that are coming into the US from some countries, and also provides some additional protections from Taiwan. But being able to keep them as our ally when it comes to chips and what we need for semiconductor chips, we're looking at Taiwan, and they want to be a friend to us, and they want to be a friend to our allies, and they want that recognition of their independence. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to be on the ground in Taipei and to meet with the president and to do some work there. And one of our best allies and strongest points when you look at that region is Taiwan, because the other Pacific Island nations, they're waiting to see what happens with Taiwan. It doesn't matter if it's the Solomon Islands or if it's Papua New Guinea or Fiji, they're all watching to see how we respond to Taiwan and if we stand with them.
So just as a quick follow-up, are you saying that you think the United States should deepen its commitment to Taiwan?
Yes,
okay.
I do.
And then what does that look like in concrete terms?
Well, the Lend-Lease program that I mentioned,
yeah.
And then more recognition of their participation. When it comes to national organizations, UN organizations, Taiwan would like to have a seat with that. They already have some recognition. They would like to broaden that. I feel like supporting that effort would be a good thing. It would help
supporting
strengthen
their
them.
Participation and membership
Yes.
in international organizations.
Right.
Okay. Another question related to China. By the way, for those of you who have questions, please be sure you send them in. I have a couple here that I'm going to ask in just a second. So how do you respond to concerns that some of the economic tensions right now between China, the United States, some of the economic tensions even between Taiwan and the United States might have some adverse implications for for national security?
When you look at the economic tensions between the US and China, they have been on their push for global dominance for many, many years. And an economic tension is not going to change that one direction or another. I think it is imperative for us to just keep focused on what we do to strengthen the United States and how we continue to work with our allies.
We only have a couple of minutes left, and I have two questions that I'd like to ask you. One of them is coming from the audience. The question that I want to ask goes back to the beginning, the first question that I asked. I asked you then what you consider to be the top security challenges now. As you look forward to the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see the biggest challenges going? What does the United States need to be thinking of as the big issues in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, you know, it's so interesting to me. In July of 2010, Admiral Mullen, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was asked this question. What do you think are the biggest challenges? What keeps you up at night? And he gave a very unexpected answer. He said the greatest threat to our nation's security is our nation's debt. And making certain that we get our spending and our nation's debt under control. In addition to that, we cannot take our eye off what China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are doing. Because as you look at a graph of what China is doing, the amount of money that they are putting into their weapons and into ships and into aircraft, it is astounding. The percentage of their GDP that is going into building that, and we have to pay attention to that. And we have to realize they are committed to that goal. You do not know where their Department of Commerce ends and their Department of Defense begins.
Last question. So here we are at Vanderbilt University. We have an Institute of National Security here. We have a focus, as you can tell, on these national security issues. What is your recommendation for us? What should we be working on? How can Vanderbilt University play a role?
And Vanderbilt is playing a role, and each of you are playing a role by being here, by caring about our nation's security and caring about emerging threats, educating people about these threats and where to be looking for the threats and awareness. You know, it's so interesting to me that sometimes people will talk about TikTok. And they'll say, well, TikTok is just a simple app. But they don't realize that TikTok is actually spyware. And when TikTok goes on your phone, it travels to every other app on your phone, and it gathers information, and it basically builds a virtual you. And that data is held in Beijing. I think protecting the privacy and security of our nation's people is vitally important, and it comes from having a strong military. It comes from an awareness of what happens with things as simple as TikTok, and certainly it comes from educational and research institutions like Vanderbilt that say our nation's security is so paramount that we're going to have an institute and do a deep dive on these issues and continue it every day.
Senator Blackburn, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for engaging with me on these issues.
Thank you.